30 seconds. I got my first Atari computer back in 81, I think. Well, a lot of people had game computers, so it had a keyboard, you could program it. I programmed my first little addition program for my daughter. It had little blue squares, and she had to add squares from one side, then a plus sign, and then squares from the other side, and she had to type in the answer. It was wrong, I hit a sound that went, eh. And then if she was right, it would go, ta-da, and I created that through another sound program. It wasn't until the late 80s, I think, we moved into Joe McCarthy. Did they have it then? No, I didn't. We moved it in Pickford. Yeah, it was 86, and I bought it then, right? So around the late 80s, I bought my first, what they call IBM PC compatibles. It was a large tower case like this, and it cost about $1,100. And it had a very small hard drive by today's standards. And so I upgraded it, kept upgrading it. I learned how to go into the lowest workings of the computer before it goes into Windows, start learning your commands from the black EEPROM. And then from there I started replacing motherboards, making it faster, buying more memory. Finally, I think it's probably about 5 or 6, not that many I built from scratch. I bought the case separately, I bought the motherboard separately, I bought the CPU separately, and the memory separately. And back then, it wasn't like today's motherboards where you had your sound and your graphics built right onto the motherboard. Back then you had separate circuit boards that would plug into the motherboard, which I'll discuss in a few minutes. So with that said, let's get started. Before I get started, actually, let me see the hands of those who have tower computers like this at home. Okay, there's quite a few, more than I thought. How many have laptops? How many have both? Okay, good. How many are running Windows 7 only? Just you? I'm running Windows 7 on my laptop. I'm running Windows 10 on my tower case. How many are Windows 10? Probably a lot. Probably most of you. Okay, good. Just know where I'm coming from. So I got some things here that are specific to Windows 7 and specific to Windows 10. Right now I'm running off a Windows 7 computer. I don't want to bring my big bulky tower in. It's kind of heavy. Okay, so what's inside your computer? Or what's under the hood? What makes it work? Somebody's got mail. All right, the first is a power supply. This power supply is specific to these tower computers. The power supply on your laptops are like this. Very small. They don't need to be that big. This one here on the desktop is without a switch. This one has a switch, which I like, because once the power is off, you can switch that switch to the opposition so you can take everything out. Now the zeros mean off and ones mean on. It's just like in computers. Computers are zeros and ones, meaning on and off. So you know that the zero is off and the one is on. They copied that from computers, 0 to 1s, binary system. So we got a handy laser pointer here. This long connector here plugs right into the motherboard. These smaller ones are 4-pin, what they call Molex connectors. And they plug into the back of your hard drive or your CD-ROM. I do have a picture of CD-ROM, and that's last. Your cooling fans in the back and on the top. Now, since this cooling fan is on the top, means that this is a bottom-mounted power supply, mounts on the bottom. Many of them have them mounted on the top, where this cooling fan will be on the bottom. So we have 2 fans. Older power supplies have 1 fan. I've seen 1 fan, some with 2. Some have 3. So this one mounts with 4 screws, and they're very easy to replace. Not many places run to sell them. It's hard to find because most people are buying laptops now. I bought one myself last year because I thought it was handy for travel, and I didn't have one. So I bought one off of eBay, very cheap, very fast processor. I did my homework. So you keep your fan clean by blowing some air on it. You can go to Office Depot, Walmart, get a can of compressed air and blow the dust off that. They're very efficient in collecting dust from the room.
Paul, someone had a question?
Question?
Power supply for the laptop is external.
Power supply
What we're
for-
looking
yes,
at
correct.
is internal.
Exactly. And these laptop power supplies, you gotta watch where you have them plugged in. My sister had a Toshiba laptop, and one time she called me and said it broke right where you plug it in. It might be the grandchildren, I don't know, but you gotta watch that the tension's off where it plugs into your laptop. If it doesn't work, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the power supply. It could mean you have a broken circuit board where it plugs in. And I think her grandson fixed it. You gotta buy a part, take the laptop apart, put her in there, and it's easy, but not many people like taking things apart. Our next slide.
Paul, can I just mention another fact about the power supply?
Sure.
The purpose of the power supply is to knock down the voltage from the 110 that comes out of your wall to the 12 volts that the computer needs. I had another thought there too, and I forgot, of course.
Yes, that's
But,
a step down, what they call a step down transformer.
I know, I was going to say, if the power supply blows, then what will often happen is that a surge of electricity will go through and kill the motherboard also. And if the motherboard's dead, then, well, forget it, buy a new computer. So, back to Paul's point about make sure that that fan is clean, brush it out or blow it out with a can of compressed air, otherwise it will overheat and blow up.
Fan actually stopped. Wonder why the computer didn't turn on. I looked in the back and the fan was stopped. So,
And it gets real hot, and that's dangerous.
yes.
Right.
So I have a can of air, and sometimes I blow the outside shell of this box that you're talking about.
Blow out the cobwebs.
Yes.
And where does that dust go? I was just telling Fran, I said, I do that, but I'm sure it's just stuck in the corner someplace.
If it's
Down here with all the
power,
rest of
you have
them.
to take it outside.
I have to take it outside.
I took mine in the driveway. I had a compressor when I had a home back north, and I just blew out with an air one from Harbor Freight.
Oh,
We gotta watch what you're doing though. I had it caught in the fan once and I broke a fan blade off.
oh.
Got a little bit too close.
So there's that much dust in it then?
And it also makes sense to pull the side panel off the computer when you're blowing all the dirt out, so you can actually blow out of the case.
Right.
Yes, you need a screwdriver in most of these cases to take it off. Some cases are what they call screwless. There's got a little thumb screw you can take off with your fingers.
Well, where is the power supply for something like this?
Where inside the computer?
Those are external. They're in little boxes like this.
Yeah, okay, but there's no fan there.
You know, your fan is inside your laptop. It's usually on the side.
Okay,
That probably doesn't have a fan
yeah.
because the microprocessor is so weak that it doesn't drain much heat. It might have some slots on the bottom to let the heat out. You have to look on there. Sometimes they will, but a small device like that doesn't get that hot. So they have to design a fan in them.
One of the things that I'd just like to mention at this point is that for those of you that run Carriage Doctor has a hardware monitor in it that if your computer's running hot, it's going to tell you that it's running hot, okay? And most of you know that since when we're talking about a laptop, it's all encased, okay? So the trick of blowing out the fan really doesn't work on a laptop. If you really want to do a good job on a laptop, actually I have to take it apart and clean the fan. And many times, if I have to go through the trouble of taking a laptop completely apart, I'm not going to blow the fan out. I'm going to replace the fan. Because the fan's a $10 or $12 item, so why would you want to just clean out the other fan when you, because there is a press bearing in the fan that sometimes it does go bend and starts to make noise. You'll know that you'll hear your laptop making whirling noises. So the good news is that if you're lucky, you don't have the problem. But you'll always know when you can feel the bottom of the laptop is hot, okay? It should never be that warm, okay? One of the tricks people use a lot is they buy the cooling fans. Have you seen the little platforms for laptops where you put the cooling fan down, you put the laptop on top of it? Supposedly it keeps the laptop cooler, okay? And one of the problems they had initially when laptops first came out with the faster chips, like the i7 chips, they tended to run very hot. And that caused some real problems, but engineering-wise, they eventually fixed the problem. But it was a problem initially because it was a pretty fast chip, so it tended to get hot very quickly, the computer itself. Okay?
So Tony,
Yes.
one of my computers is kind of old, but I really like it,
Yeah.
and it is feeling hot underneath. Should I bring it in and you put a new fan in it?
You can, but again, it depends whether you think it's worth it or not. because it's labor intensive. I mean, to get to most fans, I found that you have to completely apart. And, you know, I mean, you could bring it in, we can take a look at it. Every once in a while, you luck out where you can open an access panel and it's right there. But they didn't do that with, the engineering wise, they just put it in there figuring, you know. But the part that really made me laugh is they have like $1,000 laptop and they got a 10-cent fan in there. I mean, you know, it's only about that big. I mean, when you look at a fan here and you look at a laptop fan, that's square, okay? It's a little bit bigger, baby, but you can't get to it. Even though it has vent holes in the side, you ever notice the vent holes in the side? That's where the air will come out. Well, another trick is to take that compressed air and blow it in there. But you're actually blowing the dust around in the laptop.
Yeah.
Whereas what Paul was saying,
It's like no outlet.
what Paul was saying is that here you have an open case where you can actually blow it and it dissipates into the air.
It goes into the AC filter.
Yeah. Okay?
Thank you, Tony.
Tony, here,
Yes.
I set mine on
If
D,
you wanted help, right, here it is.
Yeah.
Spread it out now.
Yeah.
and that keeps it cool under there.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
some
not
people,
sitting flat
yeah,
on the
some
table.
people, I mean, you're laying it flat, so the air is not circulating. So some people prop it up with little pieces of
Little piece of rubber.
or anything that makes it higher than where it is,
Yeah.
okay? But as technology gets better, they're addressing that more and more, so it may not even be an issue in the next couple of years where they keep engineering these
Well,
things.
my computer's older than me.
Well, yes. Oh, for you? Yes.
All right.
Let's go. Let's go.
If you have a solid state drive, it's cooler than the,
Well, yeah, the beauty part about the solid state drive is there's no moving parts,
right.
okay? Your normal SATA drives have been spinning all the time, where with solid state, it's all done by electronics.
So that
Yeah,
gets cool.
and I love the solid state drive simply because it's so much faster than the old drives, okay? Yes,
Tony, we travel a lot. What about 220 volts going into this?
well, they're all made to go 110 or 220, or, yes, yeah.
There's a switch on the side. There's a red switch on these power supplies.
Can you
You
point it
got
out?
the picture
Yeah.
up there.
Your little through there.
Can you use your
Laser
laser pointer, right?
Uh-oh. Went bad. We'll use a red one. Right there, right in the plug. That's your voltage switch. And you just take a little tool and you switch that to the left. There's a little slot right there where you can have sharp fingernails, you can do it. Looks all, have to use the red one. All right, let's move on to the next part. This is a motherboard, for a more modern one. This is not a laptop motherboard. My wife was waving to me here.
Susan can see.
Susan can't see. How's that? This is not a laptop motherboard, this is a desktop or tower case motherboard. Let me get my pointer here. Can anyone see the red dot?
Yes. Yep.
That is a socket for your CPU, or central processing unit. That drops right in there, a certain way, which I'm not going to get into now. This lever, you push up like a paper cutter. And once that CPU is in all those little holes, you just push that lever down and it locks it in and makes contact. This frame here is where your cooling fan mounts, and I'll show you that next. These white slots are called PCI slots. They're for what we call expansion cards, for sound or video display to your monitor. These are the older ISA slots, which aren't used anymore. They kind of phase that out. You can't find it on no older motherboards now because engineers figured out how to do away with those and build in circuits. Down here is your memory slots. These two long bars right here are memory slots. Some motherboards have two, some have four. Older ones have one slot. And this is where your memory goes. I'll talk about that later. This white socket here is your power from your power supply. That's where your power supply plugs in the motherboard, and that's where the motherboard gets the power from. The smaller black socket here is for the older floppy disk drives. The blue is for your primary, which would be your hard drive, and the white would be for your CD-ROM. That's where they all plug in with what was called ribbon cables. I'll show you a picture of them later. This little round white disc, it's not really white, it's silvery. That's just white from the camera angle. But that little disc is a little smaller than a quarter, and that holds all the information the computer needs to boot up. Okay, without that battery, your computer would forget all its settings. And it gets kind of technical, but that holds your settings. I'm going to read off my handy little notes here. And that is called the CMOS battery. And it's got a little bit of RAM in it, which stands for Random Access Memory. We'll go into that next. And it's short for a complementary metal oxide semiconductor. And it's an onboard battery-powered semiconductor chip on the motherboard that stores information about your hardware settings and also stores your time. Now, if you take that out and you start your computer back up again, you'll have to reset the time. So it resets the factory default and it loses all the custom settings that are set for you at the factory. And it loses it when it runs out of juice or if you take it out. Now I've had it if you run low. They're a 3-volt battery. And additionally, the system clock resets when it loses power. So after we replace the battery, well, of course, I said that, we reset the clock, and any custom settings that would change from factory default. Okay, now I have one more for you. Another picture of a motherboard. And I got this because I want to show you the back side of the motherboard. This is what you see in the back of the computer. Over here on the far left side, you'll see a round socket. Half of it is purple, the other half is green. The purple was for a keyboard, and the green was for a mouse. And this is different from your USB wireless mouse and keyboard in that it was not plugged, what they call plug and play. With the USB devices and the hardware, you can plug it and unplug these devices like a keyboard and mouse without turning the computer off. With a PS/2 socket like this, you would have to turn the computer off, plug the mouse or keyboard in there, and then turn the computer back on again. Then the system will recognize your hardware. Here, of course, is your VGA port for your monitor. And you have a second display port, which is white, has more pins on it, and that was DVI, which stands for Digital Video Interface. You might find monitors that have that. You might have some that have both. Your choice. You wouldn't need that unless you're a gamer or play games. And it looks like you're running out of batteries on this too. See if I can press the button a little bit harder here, that helps. Next is your HDMI port, in case you want to output to a high resolution device. On top here is your internet port for your internet cable, in case you have a problem with wireless. I like wired because it's a little more secure, I think, than wireless. John, you have something to add to that? Wired internet is more secure than Wi-Fi.
And faster.
Yeah, and faster. And finally, your nice pretty colors here are for your sound. Your white here, like on the other motherboard I showed you, is for your PCI card adapters for sound or for video. And here's your socket for your CPU. Notice this has more memory slots than the first motherboard I showed. This has 4 memory slots. 2 are blue and 2 are black. Now when you normally insert your memory into these slots, you would not use the first blue and the first black. You would use black and black. First, if you have 4, you use blue and blue. And that's about all really. Those up here, these 2 black ports and 2 reds, those for your SATA. Casey only has the SA. Most people have SATA hard drives now. So we have a separate cable going from these connections to the back of your SATA hard drive. And the plugs that I showed you are for power from the power supply. I did have some photos of a different power supply, but they're up here. Let me put my microphone in my pocket like Marvin did.
Yeah.
The first power supply photo I showed you had the smaller white 4-pin connectors for your hard drive and CD-ROM. This had the smaller, thinner black ones. Now these are the power to your hard drive and CD-ROM. So you can see the cable separate. This is your data cable, SATA data cable. And that plugs in either the blacks or the reds, and it plugs into the smaller port on your hard drive or CD-ROM.
Paul, I see a heat sink there. Can you just point that out and explain why they're important?
Heat sinks.
This here,
Right.
that is probably a chipset, what they call a chipset. And what a chipset does is it gathers information for your PCI slots and your memory and sends it to the CPU. This would probably be the north bridge. They have north bridge and south bridge. That gets kind of technical. I wasn't going to mention that.
Okay. All right. Fine.
But there's two of them. There's a north bridge and a south bridge on older motherboards. On newer motherboards, if they're expensive enough, include the north bridge on your CPU.
Yeah, I was mistaken. That's not a heat sink. It looks very much like a heat sink, which sits on top of the processor, and its
Yes.
purpose is to dissipate the heat.
Right.
Because again, it gets very hot, and we're trying to point out here: don't let your computer get hot, because there's hardly any greater enemy to a computer than excessive heat.
Exactly. Your Northbridge chipset would run warm because it does the most work connected to the CPU.
I have a question. You were saying memory slots. Well, when you say memory, what is that?
RAM.
RAM.
He's gonna show.
Okay, but what is RAM? What,
We're going to get to that. That's part of the slideshow.
okay,
We're getting ahead of it.
all right. And the CPU is the brain.
CPU can be called the brain of your computer. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. Dumb it down for us.
Let me read from my notes. All right, that is next. Actually, that was next. I'm going to read from my notes here, give a little history of motherboards. On older motherboards, like I said, I think I mentioned this before, your audio and your video display were not built on the motherboards early. You had to have separate cards. Today's motherboards have the video circuits and audio circuits built in. But if you want better video, you can go out and buy a better expansion slot card. You fix in your expansion slots here. Trying to get this working. I wish I had charged up my green laser, it's rather brighter. So, the engineer figured out how to create separate integrated circuits for them, whereas the early motherboards had expansion slots that you had to insert a separate circuit board into for your sound and audio. So, I was going to talk about, should I talk about beep codes, Joe?
No, let's.
Don't go into that, okay. Let's go to the next item. There is your CPU, or Central Processing Unit. These are the second fastest CPUs that Intel makes. That jump to 9. They like odd numbers when they assign their numbers to their CPUs, because they're afraid people would get confused with your older dual core. If it was an i2, which is an even number, they get confused with the dual core. If it was an i4, they would say, oh, this is a 4 core, which wasn't always true. So that's their designated odd numbers.
i9 is the latest.
Yes, very expensive.
And is it buggy or is it good?
I wouldn't know. I don't have one. I haven't done that research.
Okay.
But they are faster than the R7s, I can tell you that, and they're very expensive. Some of these newer CPUs that first come out went upwards of $1,000,
Yeah.
maybe more. And once they're out for a while, they go down in price when a new model comes out.
So i7 is perfectly normal. I mean,
Yes.
it's.
i7 is your high performance, i5 is your middle of the road, and i3 is your entry.
Okay.
You can save money on i3s. Some i5s are faster than i7s, depending on what it is.
Everyday use is i7, i5.
Everyday use will be i5, yes. If you want high performance, you can go to i7, but you're going to pay more for your laptop.
If you look at papers and you see what computers they're selling today, especially the laptops, they're up to the 9th generation of the i7 chip. 9th generation. So it's important when you're looking at CPU and the different I series i3 could be a very good computer if it's maybe 4th or 5th generation. Okay, so the earlier versions have lower numbers. And if you turn on a computer and you went into system properties, you'd see something like i3-4. That means it's the 4th generation of an i3 chip. Okay, but we're up to the 9th generation on i7 already. 9th.
I'll add something to that.
John?
Yeah, if you buy a used computer that's an i5 and it's 6 years old, and you buy a new i3 computer, it's twice as fast. Because every time it goes one generation, like from an i7, it'll say a Series 8, the chip costs $380 9 months ago. But if you go to a Series 7, i7 chip, the same thing, that's a Series 7 chip, it costs $120 for the same chip. It's only 8 months older. But it runs half the speed, even though it's the same 7 chip. Every year it goes almost twice as fast. It's just an analogy, but that's a good way to explain it. And runs cooler.
Yeah, if you're looking at what Dell sells these days, they're usually i5 machines. i5s and i7s are the chipsets that are in these machines.
I just want to add something to that. Depending on the i5 you get, whether it's a commercial grade or if it's a regular, grade, something we see in the store, is up to 10 different versions of the i5 processor. One is very high performance, one is medium, one is low. So if you get an i5 or an i7, it doesn't mean it's really that fast, because someone had mentioned some i3s are faster than some of the i7s. Not necessarily the generation, but you can go on, and if you see a model of the computer, you can go and Google it, and it'll tell you the chip designations, 4 numbers, and you can go and see where it stands in relation to the other i5 or i7 processors to see if you're really getting your money's worth.
i5s come off the press. They have to pass certain performance tests. If the i5s don't pass certain performance tests, they're bumped down to an i3. So if you buy an i3, you can go to technician and get it bumped back up to i5 just by turning the other 2 cores on. They just turn 2 cores off on the i5s because they didn't pass the performance test. That's the back side or underside of your CPU with all those little pins. It's not really diamond shaped, this is the camera angle. They are square. Let's go to our next item, which is our cooling fan and heat sink. This is just an example. That's not the way it sits. It's the only photo I can get. It actually sits, this left side is actually the bottom. And these wires here are actually clamps that hold it to your bracket. That's part of the motherboard and holds it down. And the next photo, they have round ones too. These have little slots. You press it down with a screwdriver and you have a quarter turn and it fastens it down. There are different ways. I had older ones where you had to actually clamp down it very hard. The spring was very, you had to go over the fan and down onto the clamp on the motherboard. I thought I was going to break it, but I did it right. Very, very careful. So that you have to make sure it's clean. Like I said, I tell people that own homes, they have leaf blowers. They're very good at blowing out your whole case and this power supply. But you can go to Office Max or Office Depot or Walmart, get a can of that compressed air and blow that baby out every once in a while. Depending on if you have carpet in your house, it's going to draw more dust. So check your fans once in a while. They're not easy to see. You got to take the side panel off. If you have a screwdriver, most people have screwdrivers in their home. The side panel is held on by 2 screws in the back. It's usually on the right side looking from the back. You got to make sure you open the right side, because if you open the other side, all you're going to see is the back of the motherboard. There's no fan there.
Paul, I had a computer that had very noisy fans. I was able to go in the aftermarket and find silent ones. Big improvement.
Yes. If it's noisy, you need a new power supply or fan. They do get noisy. Like I said, they're cheap bearings. They're permanently sealed, but sometimes they get contaminants inside them. Anyone other questions on this before we go to the next part? John?
One last thing, Dad, I read if you leave your computer on the floor, it's going to get 4 times dirtier inside
Yes.
than if you have it up on the table. So the floor is not your friend.
Even though it's more unsightly on the table, it's gonna save you some troubles. So I used to do mine about every 4 to 6 months. I had a home, I took it outside the driveway, and I had a compressor from Harbor Freight, just blew it out with an arrow on. Yes?
I wonder about those, the beautiful computer desks with the little compartment and the door. I wouldn't think that would be such a good place
I had one of
to
those.
put it.
I had one of those
But we didn't, yeah.
just last year, yes.
There's no
it's very nice.
ventilation there.
Yeah, no, man,
Oh, you're putting it inside of the door?
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I wouldn't put it inside there. It's inconvenient if you have to take something apart and unplug it, you have to move it out from the wall, no.
But I mean, I would
You
think.
kick the
if-
panel out in the back of it, so your back is open.
Oh, yeah, but I don't think they come that way. You'd
No,
have to
you
do
gotta
that.
vandalize
I
it.
mean, it just doesn't seem like a good design to put your computer hard
Yeah.
drive in that box.
Just keep it out in the open, yes.
Can't you use a vacuum to clean this?
I would not use a vacuum for one reason.
Okay,
Vacuum cleaners generate static electricity. Unless you have a grinding wire attached to that, I wouldn't use a
a
vacuum.
what?
Grinding wire.
Grounding one.
If you get too close to one of the internal components with that vacuum hose, it can generate some static and kill your computer. Do not use a vacuum unless it's far away. You can blow it out inside the house with a vacuum cleaner, but I would take it outside. Never blow dust out of your computer in the indoors.
There's a lot of it. I've seen them do that.
Yeah. Okay? No vacuums. Let's go on to our next part.
I think we could get the.
This is a memory stick, so they say.
Oh, this is it.
And this is a long one that would go in your desktops or your tower case computers. It's usually called a DIMM, which stands for Dual Inline Memory Module. That is your RAM, which is random access memory. And notice the pins. It's called dual inline memory module because it has dual pins, one at each side of this slot. And these are your contacts. This just goes into your socket. Notice this notch. Now I'm going to show you how to find the best memory for your computer in a few minutes. But I want you to take note of this slot in the middle. That slot is specific to a motherboard it plugs into. Now if you're worried about getting the proper memory for your computer, you don't have to worry because if you get the wrong one, it won't fit. If this slot is just one pin to the right or one pin to the left, and the memory you buy, it will not fit the slot. So you cannot put the wrong memory in your computer. That's a shorter version, which go on your laptops. So these are short outline, dual inline memory modules, because they're shorter than your desktop memory. This is SDRAM, which stands for Synchronous Dynamic Random Access Memory. It's dynamic because it doesn't run in synchronous with the CPU's clock speed.
Question. How long are they warranted for?
What's the question?
How long is the warranty on these? It says warranty void is removed. How long are they warranted for?
As long as that label stays on. Or you can call the company that when you buy them, it should tell you what they're warranted for.
Well, that's reference to the computer warranty rather than the chip, isn't it?
Everything's 1 year.
Well, it depends on the manufacturer you're buying from.
Yeah.
Now, if you buy memory from a company like Crucial, or Corsair, or Kingston, whatever, you have to check with them and see what the warranty is. It should say in the documentation that comes with it.
Oh, it's the stickers removed.
There's another picture of it. And the last one. This is a more modern memory. It has 4 gigabytes. This is a lot by today's standards. Again, you have your slot, and if you have a memory module and a slot, either way, it will not fit your computer. So you can never put the wrong type of memory in your computer. Any more questions on this? Okay. Move on to the next part, which is your hard drive. This is a SATA hard drive. Okay. Now here's your connections in the back. Now where my red laser light is where your power connector goes to from the power supply. And the shorter one on the right is where the cable I showed you goes from the motherboard. So that's your data, and the wider one is your power. I have a photo of the inside of these drives. It consists of a series of platters made of aluminum or some other material. And these are the read heads that go across the disk at lightning speeds to read and write the data. There's a magnet in here which controls these read arms. Right now they're what they're called parked in a little plastic space here. But when they go over the disk, they're less than a human hair's length away in micro inches. And the other thing that keeps them from contacting disk is air. Your drive is airtight. When the disk gets spinning up to speed, whether it be the 54 RPM, 5400 RPM hard drives, or the faster 7200 RPM hard drives, it actually creates an airspace between these read heads and the disk. Sort of like an air hockey table. Whoever played air hockey? There are little holes in the top, and your disk floats over air. Same thing when this thing gets spinning up. These heads have just a cushion of air over them to prevent them from contacting the disk. Thinking of a Boeing 747 flying 6 inches from the ground. That's how close this is. And it's magnetic, so they have electrical signal charge. Negatives are ones, and positives are zeros. And that's how computers work, zeros and ones. You don't want to take one of these apart because it may not work right again. You want to take them apart when you know they're not working or they're damaged. I know a guy who took about 50 of these apart, and they're aluminum and all sorts of alloys. He went and got money for all the metal.
Okay.
You just asked around, who has a bad hard drive? I'll take it.
Just a practical hint on the hard drive. As Paul mentioned, they spin at tremendous speeds, 40 or 54 or 7200 RPM. That's why I discourage people from grabbing their computer while it's on and moving it around like you're tossing boxes, because that tolerance is so slight you can easily damage the hard drive. All you need is for one of those little read heads to hit the hard drive, and it's going to scratch it, and that'll probably be it. And then the other hint on that, Paul mentioned, don't take them apart. Don't take them apart unless you want to actually destroy the hard drive. What's the best way to get rid of an old hard drive so nobody can read it? Take it apart, destroy those little read heads, and it's going to be done. It'll be gone.
You should apply a hammer.
Right, a hammer is a good tool.
My last slide is your CD-ROM or DVD. They can do both. This little box would go in a desktop or a tower case. Your laptop's a little bit thinner. And I want to mention that if you turn the computer off and you wanted to take your CD out first, now your computer's off. How are you going to get that out? You don't want to turn it back on again. Here's the trick. There's a little hole in the front of this tray. You take a paper clip, you bend it out a little bit, and you push your paper clip into that little hole, and the tray will open up. It's just a spring-loaded latch. So that's a little bonus. We do forget, don't we?
Yeah.
I wanted to put this up here because I wanted to show you the ribbon cable I was talking about earlier. It goes into your motherboards. Now they're all SATA. These old IDE drives are being phased out. And that's the back of the old non-SATA hard drive. This is an IDE hard drive. It's got your pins here. I think they're 50 pin, which this ribbon cable plugs into. And the other end, the blue end, plugs into your socket on the motherboard. And here's your 4-pin power, which shows you in my first slide. See if I have any more goodies here. Click to close. That's the end of the record of what's inside your computer. See if I have any other goodies for you here.
Can you pass around the hard drive?
We can pass that hard drive around, sure.
And can you explain exactly what the hard drive does?
Thank you very much. The hard drive, I got an older hard drive, and I got a newer hard drive, a laptop hard drive, and a desktop hard drive. The 3.5-inch desktop hard drive is the older IDE, and the smaller 2.5-inch laptop drive is SATA.
Okay, are they good?
They are good, yes.
So don't drop them.
In fact, I'm selling them. Okay. Let me go back. Let me start from the beginning where memory is. I got my notes here. So, a computer uses RAM, or random access memory, to hold temporary instructions and data that's needed to complete your tasks. This allows the CPU to access instructions and data that is stored in the memory very quickly. And the memory is a lot faster than your hard drive. So your CPU can store data until the power is turned off in your memory. There are two differences between RAM and a hard drive. Number one, your hard drive stores data and programs long term, and it'll still be there after you turn the computer off. So when you run a program, data from that program goes from the slower hard drive into the faster memory so that the CPU can access the data and run the program. Your RAM, or memory, stores data until the power is turned off, but it's much faster than your hard drive. So to summarize, the CPU runs the software and processes the data that you're working on, and RAM holds the data of the software you're running. So I'm going to show you how to tweak your paging file. I don't know if any of you guys want to do this, but how many can find out what kind of processor do they have on their computer in the memory? Anyone ever done that? I will show you right now. Close this. So, you Windows 7 users, you go on your Windows Start org right here. You get a menu here. You push your mouse over computer. You right click on computer. You select properties from the context menu. This gets you the system settings. Here's all information about your CPU, your memory. It even tells you if you have a 32-bit or 64-bit operating system. This particular laptop is a Core i7, and it's a 3rd generation. Either 37 or 40. It starts with a 3, so that first number means that it's a 3rd generation. This tells you how much memory you have, and it's a 64-bit operating system. Now, the older computers are 32-bit. The most memory you can have in a 32-bit operating system is 4 gigabytes. With a 64-bit, I believe the most memory I've ever seen is 32 gigabytes. So you can put more memory in a 64-bit operating system. Now, if you have problems with your memory, you can go out and buy more memory. But here's what you do until you do have more memory. Click on that Advanced System Settings on the left side. Then up here you click on Advanced tab. Then under Performance, select Settings. And under Performance Options, you select the Advanced tab. Under Virtual Memory, you select Change. Now we have some choices here. I selected Custom Size. And they have a recommended size here, which is 12,145 megabytes. So I checked that as my initial size and my maximum size. You can select manage size too. So Windows will manage your paging file. Let me tell you a little bit what that is. It actually uses your hard drive to swap memory. Although a hard drive is a type of memory, it's actually slower. So when it's using the paging file, if it has to, now it won't use it all the time, but just use it when it has to. So we'll come out of here. I'll click cancel because I don't want to change that. Let me get into my notes here, which are somewhere else.
There it is, third one down.
That's how to set it. It doesn't tell it what it is. Let's see. It might be in RAM. Let me see. Anyone want to whistle the Jeopardy tune? Thought I had it here. Okay, it's virtual memory, or the paging file, or they also call it a swap file. The area of the hard disk that stores RAM image is called a page file. It holds pages of RAM on the hard disk. And the operating system moves data back and forth between the page file and memory. On the Windows machine, the page files have a .swp extension. Virtual memory is a memory management capability of an operating system, namely Windows, that uses hardware and software to allow a computer to compensate for physical memory shortages by temporarily transferring data from random access memory to disk storage. Most computers today have something like 32 or 64 megabytes of RAM available for the CPU to use. Unfortunately, that amount of RAM is not enough to run all the programs that most users expect to run at once. For example, if you load Windows, an email program, a web browser, and a word processor like Microsoft Word all at once into the memory at the same time, 32 megabytes wouldn't be enough to hold it all. If there were no such thing as virtual memory, then once you filled up the available RAM, your computer would have to say, sorry, you can't load any more applications. Please close another application to load in a new one. Now, with virtual memory, what the computer can do is look at RAM for areas that have not been used recently and copy them onto the hard disk. This frees up space in RAM to load the new application. Because this copying happens automatically, you don't even know it's happening. And it makes your computer feel like it's at an unlimited RAM space, even though it has only 32 megabytes installed. Because hard disk space is so much cheaper than RAM chips, it also has a nice economic benefit. Now, the read and write speed of a hard drive, of course, is much slower than RAM. And the technology of the hard drive is not geared toward accessing small pieces of data at a time. If your system has to rely too heavily on virtual memory, you'll notice a significant performance drop. The key is to have enough RAM to handle everything you intend to work on simultaneously. Then the only time you feel the slowest virtual memory is when there's a slight pause when you're changing tasks. When that's the case, virtual memory takes over, and that's perfect. So that's where virtual memory is. If any of you want to try it, you're welcome to, and I have about 10 copies up here for those who want to try it. I also have a way to get into a system, Windows 10. Now, Windows 10, to view your computer specs, like here, you would go into your search space in Windows 10 and type about, and that's where it would be. If you want to write that down, it's type about in your search space in Windows 10, and that'll bring you right to this area here. It'll tell you your processor speed and model. It'll give you memory and whether it's a 64, 32-bit operating system. So I'd like you to go home today or this week and find out if you have a 32-bit or 64-bit operating system. If it's a 32-bit, chances are your computer is more than 10 years old.
So this is the third generation. i7, third generation.
Correct. This is a third generation CPU because the first number starts with a 3.
And
That's
how
how you get
high
that.
does the i7 go?
i7s go, I believe, to 4th generation. Dot?
Oh, no, 9 now,
The-
yeah. The generation?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the i7s.
I think so.
The
Tony?
8s are what they have at Best Buy, and the 9s if you buy it straight from Dell.
I'm not talking about i9s, talking about your generation i7s.
i7s, they go up to 8.
8.
They go up to eight generation.
And then that number over there again, that 3740, that's one of 10 different types of i7s, and that's what I was explaining earlier. And they have all different speeds.
Yeah. I chose the Q series because I found the Q series are the highest performance. If you're buying your own laptop, do your homework, what you're buying. Usually they'll tell you in the ads what this number is. And go on a website called Passmark.com, P-A-S-S-M-A-R-K. And you can find your CPUs and they'll give you a comparison of performance against value in bar graph form. And I found this one is right up there. They give you 10 different CPUs on performance and the same CPUs on value. It'll compare performance to value in a bar graph form. And this particular one here was up there on 1 or 2, right up there on top. So now it's getting a good high performance CPU.
So is that .com, .org, .net?
Passmark.com, I believe.
Question,
Yes, sir.
what about these new computers that'll hold a terabyte of memory? Are those 64-bit operating systems?
I haven't seen any that have that much memory. You probably wouldn't need that much memory.
Not memory.
I think you're thinking hard drive.
Probably a hard drive is what you're talking
I'm going to hard drive it either 32 or 64. I have a terabit and a 32 at home.
about. Yeah. We're talking about hard drives or memory.
Storage.
Yeah, okay.
Storage.
People would fix their computers.
Unless your archive is filled with family videos, and a lot of photos, you probably wouldn't need half that much. I have a 500 gigabyte hard drive in this computer, and it works fine for all my photos.
Yeah, because you can put them in the cloud.
You can put them in the cloud. I have about 15 gigabytes in my Google Cloud, and I do it for my daughters who live up north. And I say, hey, if you've gotten all those off the cloud yet, 'cause I want to delete them and put more in there. No, not yet.